Welcome to Pyramid Building, presented by Lauren Buchanan, Jeff Harder, and Justin Heltzel. Our questions include: did humans really build the pyramids? How were the pyramids actually built? Is this a fraud, a myth, or a mystery?
The start of pyramid building started with the mastaba. Basically, this was just a single-story square rectangular block made of mud brick. Inside the mastaba, a deep burial chamber was dug into the ground in line with stone and bricks so that they could bury their pharaohs underground. And basically, the mastaba was the starting point or the foundation for the stepped mastaba, which then evolved into pyramids as we know them today. Imhotep, the master architect, physician, priest, poet, and advisor of the pharaoh, played a huge part in starting the step pyramid from the mastaba. It basically started the whole trial and error process of pyramid building, and he is basically known as the Leonardo da Vinci of Egypt, when really Leonardo da Vinci is the Imhotep of Italy. Egyptologists have a good idea who his parents were and where he was born, and also there are statues of him showing that he was an ordinary man and not an alien. He designed the first step pyramid for Djoser, the pharaoh of Egypt. Djoser's step pyramid was basically the start of this trial and error process. It started out as only a mastaba, but then developed into a 6-step layer mastaba. As I mentioned previously, Imhotep was the designer of this building, and it was built of mainly stone and blocks that were crude and barely weighing 100 pounds each. It was irregular and poorly built, but it was built in 2649 BC and it measured 60 meters tall. Basically, this pyramid started the transition from doing something abnormal and not just doing the mastaba and developing into an actual pyramid. The last pyramid of this trial and error process is Khufu's pyramid. This is also known as the Great Pyramid of Giza, and it measures up to 141.6 meters and was finished in 2566 BC. This was the first pyramid that was actually considered to be perfect and ended the transition between trial and error process and perfecting the craft. Basically, the Egyptians went through all these different pyramids in order to maintain the perfect pyramid as we know today. And without going through these trial and error processes, they would have never, ever completed an actual pyramid that we know. And the reason that there's so much speculation as to who built the pyramids is because of lack of information and, this trial and error process not being known to the general public, I guess you could say. And if this was known, it shows a true evolutionary timeline, basically, that shows every generation outdoing the generation before them. And it took up to 8 decades to finally build the perfect pyramid. And since then, they kept building and building pyramids until they built a total of 180 pyramids. Then they finally decided to give up, and start burying pharaohs underground due to it being a better hiding place, less work, so looters, they can't get in and steal stuff. It's better hidden, basically. But anyway, the trial and error process shows true human evolution, and it proves that this was not the doing of some other life form or other being, or just came to be one day because they got it from somebody else. They actually went through trials and finally completed their task of making the perfect pyramid.
There is much proof that humans built the pyramids. Nile peoples can be traced back 12,000 years living along the river. At 8,000 years ago, they were completely living off of domesticated food sources. They have clear connected lineages and an established society. They have high knowledge of mathematics and engineering.
The process for building the pyramids is still widely debated by scholars, and many have different theories about how it was achieved. Flinders Petrie, one of the earliest Egyptologists, studied the Giza Plateau from 1880 to 1882, and his survey work there led him to determine that the site of the pyramids had been leveled by the ancient Egyptians so that they could have the flattest land possible to work with. Nearly 100 years later, Mark Lehner produced a map of the area and determined that only the edges of the pyramids had been leveled to create the most horizontal edges possible. For building materials, the ancient Egyptians used limestone and granite mined from various sites around the building area. Granite was mined at the ancient site of Aswan, and was possibly mined with copper alloy tools such as picks or maws. There is also evidence that they just moved large surface boulders of granite from one space to the next. Limestone was mined at a site on the opposite side of the Nile, known as Tura. How the blocks were ferried across the Nile is still debated by scholars today. Some believe that the blocks had been fastened to the bottom of boats and ferried across with the tides, raising and lowering the boats as the tide moved in and out. While the blocks are perfectly cut for building, no drilling equipment or saws have survived the time to show us how the stones were cut. One of the most widely accepted theories for how blocks were moved around the pyramids is the theory of ramps. No ramp system in its entirety remains. Remnants of partial systems have been found, leading scholars to believe that 5 different ramp types had been used to build the pyramids. The first, most basic ramp system is the linear ramps, probably used during the 3rd dynasty. These ramps would have been wide and would have gone up levels on the pyramid so that the blocks could be dragged from level to level. The next type of ramp is a staircase ramp, a very steep ramp heading up one face of the pyramid used to bring blocks up a single face. Traces of this ramp have been found at many different pyramid sites. The third type of ramp is the spiral ramp. Many questions still linger about this type of ramp, like what it would have rested on and how corrections would have been made to the corners, as this ramp would have been covering the corners of the pyramid. The fourth style of ramp is a zigzag ramp. This set of ramps would set up a zigzag course, moving up one face of the pyramid. Scholars believe that this type of pyramid would have been incredibly effective in building the step pyramids. However, they have been unable to recover any evidence that this was in fact used on the step pyramids, further adding to the mystery of how the pyramids were built. The last style of ramps would be interior ramps, and traces of these have been found at many pyramids. While interior ramps may have worked very well for building the interior of the pyramid, exterior ramps were still required to finish the outside of the pyramid once the casing was finished. While ramps are great for moving blocks short distances, they require a lot of manpower. Additionally, ramps cannot move a block straight up in the air. To learn more about how the blocks were lifted, we turn to the Greek historian Herodotus' account. Herodotus visited the pyramid building site at around 450 BC. It was there he saw one of the most astounding machines he had ever laid his eyes on. Herodotus described structures that were being built tier by tier. Herodotus saw a machine made of short wooden planks lifting stones from the ground to the first tier, then to another machine made of the same materials from the first tier to the second tier, from the second tier to the third tier, and so on. The structure of the machine is thought to have been quite complicated. The machine is thought to have a rectangular base with 2 tower-like protrusions coming off the top, as well as 2 support beams on either side of the tower, giving the entire machine a trapezoid-like appearance. In the center of the machine, there is the small wooden planks where the blocks would be placed. Herodotus could not determine the amount of these machines at the building site. However, due to their light weight, they were most likely picked up and moved by the builders, allowing for the machines to be moved from tier to tier as the blocks are moved from tier to tier.
In conclusion, science and evidence prove human presence while building the pyramids. Workers are specifically mentioned in hieroglyphs. Pyramid building was not a single try endeavor. In fact, there is a very human trial and error process present here. Thousands of years of civilizations led up to being able to build the pyramids. This is a mystery, fraud, and a myth. False claims of pseudo-archaeology are applied here. The theory of aliens draws unstable and not feasible conclusions between geometric shapes, positioning of the stars, and other vast implications that are not scientifically sound. Ethnocentrism is also present, as it is applied that a non-human species built the pyramids.